Welcome to Thinkin, a podcast series by Kautilya School of Public Policy.
Government, communities, businesses, and international organizations aim to develop green economies that can result in economic growth, social equity, and at the same time reduce environmental risks. Environmental challenges such as overconsumption, waste, climate change, etc. are sometimes referred as wicked problems. This is because these problems have interdependent causes influencing them. These problems interact with each other in unpredictable ways, and therefore it becomes difficult to foresee the consequences. And because of the complexity of the problem keeps on evolving, it causes policy failures and becomes difficult to find the perfect solution or say the right solution. These challenges are socially complex and have economic hurdles. They do not lie conveniently in the ambit of one particular sector or organization. They cross both governance boundaries and academic disciplines. Hence, a holistic approach is demanded. And today we have with us Ms. Wilma Rodrigues, a pioneer in the waste management industry and the founder and CEO of SAAHAS Zero Waste. SAAHAS Zero Waste is an environmental enterprise with 20 plus years of experience in waste management, resource recovery, and social impact. It ensures maximum recovery resource from all streams of waste by diverting it away from landfills and sending it to authorized destinations. Their initiatives are in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to facilitate economic progress, women empowerment, and action against climate change. Ms. Rodrigues was also awarded Namma Bengaluru Award for the Best Social Entrepreneur in 2012, Swachh Best Practice Award 2018 for her Zero Waste program for bulk generator, and many more. Welcome, ma'am, to our policy podcast. Ma'am, let us start with how your journey began in waste management and why it was an important decision to shift your organization model from a not-for-profit to a social enterprise.
Yeah, so that's that's something that we need to understand because when we started SAAHAS as an NGO in 2001, the idea of SAAHAS was to look at the municipal solid waste rules and the rules which came out actually in 2000, just 1 year before SAAHAS NGO was founded. And the rules gave us very clear and very promising directions in terms of resource recovery. How do you reduce waste as a first step? And whatever waste you do generate, how are resources recovered from this waste? And how does that waste then come back to us as products? And how do we therefore reduce our dependence on virgin products? That is the core of our solid waste management rules, which came out in 2000. And in 2001, when we set up the NGO SAAHAS, we looked at these rules coming alive on the ground, because otherwise you just have rules and they are good to have on a shelf, they're good to talk about, but they're not translating into anything in terms of change on the ground. So the idea of SAAHAS was to actually peg on the rules and actually bring about the change on the ground. In the initial years, we focused a lot on reduce, especially reduce of plastic waste. We had this campaign called Less Plastic for Me, which looked at single-use plastic and how actually it's, does not really add value to our lives, but it creates a big burden on the environment. So in the initial years, we, as an NGO, did a lot of work around reduce. We also then started looking at how do we enable recycling and resource recovery to take place. And we did a few pilots as NGO SAAHAS. But then I realized that actually, like any other delivery of service, we need to have waste come into a business model. It needs to have an enterprise model, because in those years, we realized that there was most of the waste managed by the informal sector. And there was a lot of misuse and exploitation in that sector, because there was the feeling that, there is no responsibility of the persons who generates waste. The responsibility of the person is just to consume and then give the waste out and forget about what happens beyond that. So you had a large informal sector that was managing waste mostly or only from revenues that you got from sale of waste, sale of paper, sale of plastic. And that revenue is really completely insufficient for managing waste holistically. And in that process, there's exploitation of the workforce. It's not the kind of livelihood that in India we should be accepting. So that's the reason why we transitioned all our learnings of the NGO SAAHAS, we used and transitioned, or I wouldn't say transition, that's a wrong word to use, but we started a second entity, which is SAAHAS Zero Waste, the business model, the social business model. And SAAHAS Zero Waste today looks at delivering services to waste generators. So it is bulk generators in the form of institutions, in the form of corporate campuses, in the form of corporate campuses, and it is also delivery of services to brands, both FMCG and the electronic companies who now, as per regulation, are required to have a channel for take back, recovery and recycling of things like electronic waste and plastic waste. And then, of course, we also have a vertical where we sell products made from waste. So the idea of SAAHAS Zero Waste now is to scale up solutions which bring in maximum resource recovery. And the NGO SAAHAS continues as a separate body, as a registered not-for-profit that works along with various different stakeholders, including the government, to pilot and to pull out solutions for proper waste management. So they are also involved with solutions on the ground in smaller towns, smaller villages, and they work closely with companies. They work on CSR funding, and they work with government to make this happen.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, could you also shed light why you felt the need to dive into the sector of waste management?
Yes, because it's necessary for each waste generator to take responsibility for their waste. This is not charity that we are doing as a service provider. It is important for every waste generator, whether it is a corporate campus or an apartment, to ensure that up to 96% plus of their waste goes into proper resource recovery and recycling. And for that, there is the thinking should be around polluter pays. And only when we get service fees from, like any other service, if we get service fees for managing waste for our customers, then the revenue from waste and a revenue from the service fee enables us to actually have social and environmental impact. So this is a business model. Waste management cannot be only from cannot be a waste management service cannot come only from a not-for-profit model. It has to be around revenues that you generate, which are adequate, so that we put back into proper systems. So that's the reason we transition, because when you work with as an NGO, you are dependent on, say, grants, and grant funding from CSR or grant funding from foundations does not allow you to provide proper waste management services. It's good as a project, as a pilot project, you experiment, you try, but then you need to have customers who will then on a month-to-month, day-to-day basis use your services, tie up with you formally, and then also take responsibility for their waste. So there is a delivery of service which is around an enterprise model that we found was necessary.
Right, ma'am. So there's a very interesting concept that you said. Usually, it's the customers who get paid when they sell their waste, right? So, like if we have a pile of newspapers, when we give it to the kabadiwalas, they pay us. So how difficult was it to approach businesses and organizations so that you could manage this financial gap and make it more sustainable?
Yeah, it is really sad that we've had this model where there has been the thinking that waste equals wealth. Yes, there is wealth in when we manage our waste, but that wealth, we should stop seeing the money in front of our eyes when we talk about wealth. It's not money, it's the giving back to environment. It is the fact that you reduce your carbon dioxide footprint, you reduce the dependence on natural resources when you recycle, you enrich your soils when you compost, and the soil gives you good food in return. So that is the wealth that you can bring when you manage your waste efficiently, in line and aligned with nature. Unfortunately, the Kabadiwalas have over many years given us such excellent services when they come to our homes and collect our newspapers. But when we go back end and we see what it does to the livelihood of the Kabadiwala, just because we as a middle class families or households expect that 8 rupees, 10 rupees per kg from the Kabadiwala. Because of that, very often his business does not have sufficient revenues so that he can pay people minimum wages. He will not have a proper, you look at the Kabadiwala shops, yeah? Can we not have better infrastructure for them? Can we not have children working? His son, his child, his wife will be part of the business, they will not be paid. So that is the big tragedy of Indian society, which we must accept. Yeah, we have, unfortunately, when we talk about livelihood, we believe livelihood is giving a job. It's giving a job which will also enable people to live with dignity. And that'll happen if they get access to social security, minimum wages, safe working conditions. That's the kind of job that waste management can give, if only we pay appropriately for waste management services. So I hope everybody who's listening to this podcast will stop accepting any money for the waste that they give, whether it is newspapers, whether it is carton boxes, whether it's a mobile phone. Yeah, we pay so much for our mobile phones when we want to buy one. And yet when we want to give it when we want to buy a new one, the old one, we want to hold on to it and believe that we should get paid for it. And because we do that, we are actually, there is a big detrimental impact on the environment, because the recycling of that phone, if it's not done formally, if it's not done with proper environmental norms, it's a monster that we will create for ourselves. So it's not just individual homes, but it's also corporate campuses. In fact, it would be nice, when you go back to college, to see what your college does with, say, its carton boxes, its newspapers. It should not be giving it for sale. It should be giving it for formal recycling and resource recovery. And we must make sure that whoever collects our waste has the ability to pay appropriately, so that there is no exploitation.
Yes, ma'am. So in our homes, we do not give a second thought tackling waste management, because we necessarily do not see an economic value there, right? Sure, we do have our neat piles of newspapers ready to be sold, but we do not have separate bins for dry waste and wet waste, even though municipalities and local self-governments try a lot in forming, but still we do not see this practice as a mainstream. So how can we address that waste segregation at the source itself?
Yeah, waste segregation at source, we do various things in our home, right? We, put up curtains, we have sweeping, cleaning, all of that. So segregation of waste has to be adopted as just another part of our daily lives. And if we don't do it, then there should be penalties. There has to be penalties. And I think there are enough of ways in which we can enforce penalties. If we're really wanting, we've seen the kind of pollution that we have in our cities. Across our cities, India has now become one of the most polluted countries with very bad air quality. And waste management, poor waste management, burning of waste, whether it is stubble waste or plastic waste, is contributed very largely to this situation. So we can't say, what do? We have to do. We have to put penalties on apartments or even single homes or corporate campuses and even institutions. Today we see even educational institutions who are imparting education don't want to talk about waste segregation. And as young people, I would really expect you to demand from the institutions where you are, where you are studying, for them to have proper waste management systems, and not just segregation. Segregation is a given. I'm saying that I will not accept that, we cannot do this. But now we have to go to the next step. What happens to our segregated waste in institutions, in corporate campuses? There is enough of technologies available for composting or biogas on site. There should be the systems of managing waste on site. Even in a small home, in a household, you can compost your waste at home. So that is the level at which as responsible human beings, we have to go to, where on-site waste management for wet waste and dry waste, paper, plastic, metal, glass. Across most of our cities and even in our small towns, there are solutions now available for resource recovery of these materials.
Yes, ma'am, definitely. I think we have to stop giving excuses and start practicing. So going to the next question, while the extended producer responsibility is at a nascent stage in India, the last 5 years have failed to translate policy into action due to lack of accountability from the producers and the lack of enforcement from the authorities. What are the policy gaps that you see in the new draft regulation on extended producers responsibility published by Ministry of Environment?
So one is the fact that the ministry and the corporate sector have they've not moved in a very systematic, in a quick way. This framework has now been there for about a year, and there's so many deliberations, but surely we could close out on the deliberations and close out on the framework and then improve on it. Yeah, so, but it is fortunate that to a large extent over the last 3 years, I would say the EPR for plastic waste and electronic waste has moved forward. So there are, there are now practices that are being followed where channeling is taking place, aggregation is taking place, and companies are now signing up with organizations like us to help them in this reverse logistics process. So it has happened in the last 3 years, but now because of the plastic problem and the e-waste problem having grown exponentially, we have to double up on the whole exercise of take back and collection. And that is where there are gaps. There are gaps, especially now in the new framework. You need to get authorizations from different ULBs, from different cities and ULBs, so that there is a monitoring and a tracking system. Unfortunately, a lot of our smaller ULBs, even the larger ones, are not understanding their role in it. There has been a gap in communications. So many of us as organizations find it very difficult to work with these ULBs because they are not equipped enough to give us authorizations, to do the paperwork, to make it simple to understand, to do the paperwork so that we can actually deliver on take back and delivery. So that's one big gap. But the other big gap is also now this is our opportunity to take back with impact on environment and social justice. And these rules are not talking about formalization of the informal sector to the extent where when you collect plastic, and most of the plastic is collected by informal sector, and we should be then making sure that whoever is collecting our plastic has the abilities to pay appropriately to everybody involved in the collection process. And they should have access to infrastructure, which is, at least a roof on their head as a minimum. Yeah. So a proper infrastructure, proper minimum wages should be embedded in the rules, because then the producer pays and the consumer pays more for the products. Yeah, and these, when I say pay more, it is really very, it's actually money that you would spend, as we say, on chai pani. It's as little as that. And yet we see brands, big brands, putting a lot of stops to actually paying appropriately so that proper channeling and take back will happen. If the consumer, the brands can easily put it back on the consumer, and maybe the consumer will consume less. But that's what we also want. We want responsible consumption now. Yeah, and as young people, again, I'm saying to you, we should push back on mindless consumption and pay appropriately so that we will be having a proper circular system rather than just this linear system where we take, make, and throw.
Yes, ma'am. Now that you mentioned circular system, circular economy concept is relatively new in India. However, the concept is gaining prominence. The Indian waste management industry offers huge potential, as only 30% of the 75% recyclable waste is being recycled currently. What are the potential policies area that the government should focus on to make the process faster?
I would say that we should, recently the government of Denmark has really started demanding that any product that is claiming to be green, that is claiming circular economy, needs to prove it, needs to do an LCA and prove that that product has earned the tag of green for whatever parameters you want to put on that, that green parameter, because today there's just too much of greenwashing. Circular economy has become a nice word. So everybody just says, this is circular economy. In the waste management system, we have today waste to energy being pushed, or rather being talked of as circular economy. Waste to energy, when you burn resources, just because you don't want to segregate your waste, you have a burning incineration option. And if you're calling that recovery of energy circular, it's not circular. It's not, for sure, because you're burning resources that can come back to you for use. So it's not circular. So it's very important that we really push our policies to show accountability for products which we claim as circular. Yeah, just even the plastic industry has brainwashed us to a large extent to believe that their plastic can be recycled, and they have not put adequate infrastructure or investment into actually into enabling recycling to happen. And that's why we have this situation today with plastic pollution. So we do need these buzzwords to come on the ground and we need them to be really have meaning on the ground. So I would say that let's be cautious. Circular economy is a good concept, but we need to have both the corporate sector get out of its mindset of greenwashing and be more sincere in the way it actually rolls out a circular economy policies and circular economy businesses. Yeah, it is possible for it, fully possible, but there will be implications. There will be implications in this churn of our economy. Yeah, our economies today have to go through that churn, and we have to have an economy which is more distributive in the way it is designed. It cannot be just monies which are generated or revenues which are generated for 5%, 10% of the populations. Yeah, it has to be distributed across 100%. And a circular economy with a mindset of supporting businesses which actually help closing the loop. Yeah, we in our waste management businesses need investment, we need infrastructure, we need enough of revenues so that we can deliver good services and deliver actual circular economy on the ground. But in that process, maybe the manufacturing of these businesses, of these products, etc., will have to deal with less gross margins, less profitability, and less consumption. Yeah, and that is what we will mean, what we need when we actually bring on the ground circular economy systems.
Yes, ma'am, definitely. So someone who has been practicing zero waste July for the past few years and who has been actively promoting the same in the family, I thought I have been able to make a serious dent in the zero waste lifestyle. But then COVID hit and it changed our lives permanently. So we see PP kits and all latex gloves, everything all over us, even in roads now and in lakes and everywhere. So how has COVID impacted the waste management industry? Do we see a new potential there? Because everyone is clearly aware how much waste has gone and how it's not being sourced properly, or have we went back few years now?
No, I think on the one hand, because of the pandemic and the health and people realizing the environment and the health, joining the dots between environment and health, I think there has been a big breakthrough in that sense. What we now, of course, you've seen an increase in single-use plastic in the form of PPEs, as you mentioned, but what we need, and this is the push that we should give, if a PPE has to be a single use, then the manufacturers must be able to take it back for recycling. And there is technologies that can be brought in to make sure that there is recycling of even PPEs which could be contaminated. There is possibilities for that. And anyway, these PPEs, I mean, you can go in a stepwise manner. And as a first step, you could look at maybe co-processing in a cement kiln, making sure, it doesn't get into our water bodies. But there are ways in which these items do not need to come into the open environment. As a next, as I think what the pandemic has done is to bring attention to consumption habits and how we need to reduce that. So I think many that I have talked, I'm happy to have met many people now who, for instance, understand the problem that textile waste has brought into our ecosystem. And many of us have now put a pushback on that, saying we're not going to enroll into fast fashion, but we need our brands, our textile brands, etc., to make sure that there is a sustainability in the whole fashion industry. And it starts with reduce. We don't need to, buy mindlessly. So a lot of these habits have now, come into our system. Yes, there's been the other problems around, the thinking that hygiene and single-use plastic is closely associated with that. But there are ways in which we can even address this situation, especially with respect to single-use plastic. And that is a commitment that each one of us has to make as individuals. When I go out, I don't just carry my shopping bag, but I carry with me multiple containers so that, when I have to buy biscuits, I buy it from a bakery and put it into a container, not a packaging. When I go out and I need a cup of coffee, I don't take a paper cup or a plastic cup. I have my own cup with me. So that's the lifestyle change that I think many of us are moving towards. And that realization has come because of now the linkage between health and environment.
Yes, ma'am. So coming to the last question, as policy students, when we look into various sectors, especially waste management and climate change, what would you suggest the areas and the stakeholders we should especially focus upon?
Yeah, as policy students, make sure there is also a implementation integrated into the policy. Okay, because otherwise we are just having policies which are not translating into change. So it is important for public policy to include the ways in which this implementation will take place. And especially with the corporate sector, we need to have very strong levels in which compliance is also integrated into the policies. Because we've seen, as I said, the corporate sector making use of a lot of tax benefits, land, all of that. And yet when it comes to compliances on environment, there are big gaps, and that has led to the situation that we are in currently. So the consumer perhaps may not be the, may not have the power to quickly bring about those changes, but policies developed by government, enforced by government, and policies which start in institutions like yours should definitely also put a strong compliance into the policy as well.
Definitely, ma'am. It was an absolute delight talking to you. Hope we get a chance to meet you in person and that we could invite you in our college. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day.
Thank you, Therese, and all the best. All the best.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Bye. Bye.
Bye.